All the problems everywhere from, the textile mills in New England to the rug mills in Amsterdam, New York. All of these industries were either closing or moving out or downsizing. And Watertown was no different. I mean, a lot of paper industry was moving away. New York Air Brake, which had been a mainstay for a long time, was an aging facility. And other plants were either downsizing or closing as well. Some of them survived, like Knowlton Papers. Some local people invested in that and kept it going. The Air Brake made a metamorphosis when the Germans bought it out, and the Knorr Company and Mr. Thiele, they breathed new life into it, so that survived. Some other industries came into being, like car freshener, which obviously is a well-known international product. So, Watertown's industrial economy was generally less vibrant, but it was still there.
These places that once were fairly thriving, I mean, you see the size of the houses in town, and you think, wow, some rich people lived here. You look at the size of the factories, you look at the hotels, and you think, wow, this was a pretty happening place. But that industry that made it run left, and like mill towns everywhere, when that leaves town, the only people who stay are people who can't afford to leave. And I think that cycle, that Watertown probably hit its prime sometime in the early 20th century, like a lot of northern New York towns that were associated with these industries.
Another challenge for Watertown came in the form of urban renewal. Started by President Lyndon B. Johnson, this movement encouraged the removal of older and aging facilities to make room for a new era of modern buildings and architecture. The objective was to create demand for new buildings and thus new construction jobs. But the movement failed because the suburbs were already developed, and the businesses that were evicted from the inner city simply found a reason to develop in the suburbs. So large city blocks were demolished and sat vacant for decades.
Lyndon B. Johnson, he created this new bill to get rid of the old and create a whole new world. With that, a lot of buildings from the 19th century in America, not just in Watertown, were put on the demolition block. A lot of them were just considered too old. We want a whole new space age look. We want buildings with no windows. We want concrete pillars and all this stuff that would improve our cities. Everything that happens here happened elsewhere. Urban renewal was from one coast to the other. It seemed like the cities that were most affected by it were the existing cities that had more structures on them. Because we're the Northeast. The oldest part of this country is the Northeast. And as a consequence, a lot of old 19th century buildings were just considered old and useless.
Soldiers from all over the U.S. are stationed at Fort Drum, but there are also homegrown heroes from Watertown who achieved great honor while serving in the military. Medal of Honor recipient George Taylor was one of them.
The Medal of Honor is the highest award that can be awarded upon any service member in any of the branches. George Taylor was born and raised and grew up here in the city of Watertown. He was 1830 is when he was born. He ended up in the United States Navy and serving on board the USS Lackawanna. The Lackawanna major battle engagement was in the Battle of Mobile, Alabama. He was an armorer on board the ship. During the battle, it took extensive damage from enemy fire, several broadsides. The ship caught on fire. It was spreading towards the armory. George Taylor went down below decks after being wounded from the attack, put the fire out with his bare hands, sustaining more injuries, went back to his duties and continued the battle. During that action, George Taylor received the Medal of Honor for his actions that day on board the ship, for saving his crew and his ship. The reason things like this are so important is because it's our heritage, it's where we come from. Our past and our history and sacrifices that people make shouldn't be forgotten.
We're kind-hearted people, we're compassionate, we look out for others, and there's so many families that have a tremendous amount of history here. And when you go out, whether it be grocery shopping or getting some gas or going to church, I mean, you're always seeing people that you have history with. And I like my roots deep, and they're very deep in Watertown for many families that have been a tremendous benefit to our community. People just wanting to make Watertown better, whether they volunteer or whether they work to do it. There's so many good things that people have done for our city of Watertown, and I'm just proud to represent such a great class of people.